My name is Aaron, and this happened last year, right after my fiancé and I bought our first starter home together. We're an Asian couple, which matters for what happened. It was a small, two-story place in a plain suburban town called Brookshade in Northwood County. Nothing fancy at all, but to us, it was supposed to be something special. Quiet street, a decent backyard, a cheap wooden fence, and rows of ordinary houses. We felt lucky we could even afford a house at our age. It should have been one of the happiest chapters of our lives. But that feeling got ripped away from us pretty fast, and you'll see why. The first few days were normal. We unpacked, met a couple of neighbors, and tried settling in. The couple on our right were friendly and older. The guy across the street waved and walked over to say hello. But the house on our left, that one was different. We didn't see a single person come out of it, curtains always closed. The house itself looked clean and maintained, but it always felt oddly dark inside, like no one was home, even though a car was always in the driveway. The first sign of anything strange happened one afternoon. My fiancé and I were carrying groceries in, and she whispered that someone was standing in the front window next door. I looked over and saw a man behind the curtain, half hidden, watching us. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. The second he noticed us looking, he stepped away. Weird. Sure, but we shrugged it off. Some people keep to themselves. Over the next week, though, we started noticing him more. Not outside, always inside. I'd catch him at the living room window when I left for work. Maya saw him in the upstairs window once while checking the mail. Every time we spotted him, he seemed to be staring at us, but the moment we looked back, he vanished. Then one night, something happened that we couldn't brush off. Around midnight, I was getting ready for bed and walked past our upstairs window, the one facing directly into his house. Out of habit, I glanced across, and he was there, in his upstairs window, not hiding behind a curtain this time, fully visible, standing straight, his face aimed right at our bedroom. I froze, wondering if I was imagining it, but as soon as he realized I was looking, he stepped back into the darkness. I remember laughing and saying to Maya, "Oh, great. Our neighbor's a creep." The next morning, the man actually came over to our door, the first time we'd seen him outside. He knocked politely, introduced himself as Harris, and apologized for looking like he was spying the night before. Said he'd been putting something on his window ledge and didn't mean to look inside our room. He smiled the whole time, friendly enough to make me feel a little relieved. I'm not saying I suddenly liked him. Something still felt off, but I didn't want to be rude, so I told him it was fine. When I went back inside, I told Maya he seemed okay, but definitely odd. We decided to let it go. A week later, something happened we couldn't ignore. In the middle of the night, Maya shook me awake, saying she heard someone in the yard. I was half asleep, but I got up to check, doing the whole man of the house thing, I guess. When I looked outside, I saw someone walking around in our backyard. Unless it was Bigfoot, it was a person, a grown man, pacing like he was searching for something. I reacted without thinking and yelled, "Hey," even though that probably wasn't the smartest idea. The figure bolted toward the gate and slammed it behind him. Since we barely had anything in the yard besides a few tools, I didn't think anyone was trying to steal anything. I checked the front windows and didn't see anyone. I didn't step outside. I didn't feel safe. Eventually, we went back to sleep, though both of us were uneasy. A few nights later, it happened again. Maya woke me, saying she heard rustling. This time, we both heard it, a sound like someone messing with a lock or a latch. I checked the window again and saw someone in the yard. My whole body tightened. I yelled that I was calling the cops. The person immediately headed to the gate and slammed it shut again, but this time, I saw enough of his posture and face to know it was Harris. I yelled, "Harris!" He didn't answer, just walked away calmly, like nothing had happened. This time, I went outside. I checked the yard, then the side of the house. I told myself I had to confront him. I walked over to his place and knocked. He opened the door within seconds, meaning he'd been awake the whole time. He smiled, that same smile, and actually laughed as he admitted it was him in our yard. He said he'd been chasing off kids who liked to jump fences, and that they had jumped from his yard into ours. Claimed it happened all the time. Told us we'd get used to it. He kept smiling, but that smile didn't feel normal. It felt like something was behind it, something hateful. I swear I saw it in his eyes. I didn't argue. just told him I understood and went home. But inside, I didn't buy a single word. The next day, he came over again and invited us for Chinese food the following night, a Friday. We figured saying yes might clear the weirdness between us. Maybe it would help us be cordial neighbors. We went over around 7 p.m. Friday night. The moment we stepped inside, the atmosphere felt off. Harris seemed already buzzed and kept drinking more wine. He said he'd ordered a bunch of Chinese food and made this odd comment like, "I know you guys love Chinese food," then laughed. His comments throughout the night were passive-aggressive. When the food came, we offered to help set the table, but he nearly snapped at us for trying. The whole dinner was tense. As he drank more, he got worse. The passive remarks turned into direct insults. He made it clear he didn't like that an Asian couple had moved in. At first, we ignored it, hoping he'd stop. He didn't. He got louder, angrier, ranting about how the town had a history of being white. He said things that made both of us genuinely feel unsafe. Then he admitted outright that it had been him in our backyard those nights. Didn't even try to deny it. The breaking point was when he yelled that we weren't welcome here and that the neighborhood wasn't for people like us. We didn't argue. We got up and left, walked fast back to our house, didn't say a word until we were inside. Doors locked. We didn't know what else to do, so we went to the other neighbors, went door to door asking what they knew about Harris. Some were shocked. Others weren't surprised. A few told us he was a drunk whose wife had left him years ago. Didn't make us feel any better. We were the ones living next to him. After that, we avoided him completely. No looking at his house, no unnecessary trips outside, but you can only avoid your next-door neighbor for so long. Every night felt tense, like he could be watching or trespassing again. Then one night, a brick came crashing through our downstairs window, shattered glass everywhere. We jumped out of bed. I ran downstairs. There was the brick on the floor. No note, just a brick. We knew it was him. Who else could it be? But we had no proof. We called the police. They talked to him, but he denied everything, acting confused. They couldn't do anything except file the report. We talked about getting cameras, staying and fighting it out. But honestly, we were scared, exhausted. We both felt like something worse was coming if we stayed. Not even 2 months after moving in, we started packing again. We couldn't live next to someone who hated us, who had already gone into our yard night and then thrown a brick at our house. Before we left, we filed another report explaining everything. The police said they'd keep an eye on it, but we didn't feel protected. We moved out as fast as we could. Left behind the home we thought would be the beginning of our life together. I genuinely believe that if we had stayed, you would have heard about us on the news, murdered by this man. I wish it weren't illegal to dox people because I'd love to drop his address right here, but all we can do now is move forward. This all happened a couple of years ago, around late 2021. My name is Elias, and when my fiancée Mara, now my wife, and I first moved into our place in Brookline Ridge, everything felt perfect. It was a quiet suburban block with a cozy 2-story house we picked out for the family we hoped to build someday. The neighbors all seemed warm enough too, but the couple living on our right immediately stood out as the friendliest. They looked like they were in their late 30s, though I never asked their ages. The husband introduced himself as Caleb, and his wife was Lena. They came off as genuinely sweet people. They even brought over a homemade red velvet cake the day after we moved in, a welcome gift. It was incredible, and we thanked them more times than I can count. For the first couple of weeks, life in our new neighborhood was peaceful. Quiet days, calm nights, until strange things started happening with Caleb and Lena. One night around 11 p.m., I woke up to shouting from outside. I went to our bedroom window and realized it was coming from their house. I couldn't see anything. Our houses sat at an angle that blocked the view, but it definitely sounded like a full-blown argument. After a minute or two, I saw Lena storm out, get into her car, and drive off. Silence followed. I told Mara about it, and we figured they must have had a fight, and Lena left to cool down. I remember feeling a little thrown off because they'd always seemed so gentle with each other, but every couple gets into arguments, so we let it go. A few nights later, Mara and I were getting home late. As soon as we stepped out of the car, we heard raised voices again. Their main door was open, just the storm door closed. So the argument carried clearly into the night. Still, it wasn't our business, so we minded our own. Then days passed, and I noticed something. Lena's car was missing, not just for a day or two, longer. I figured she might have gone away somewhere, maybe a trip or a visit with family. Caleb's car was still always there, and I'd occasionally see him step out to get the mail or leave for a short errand. But another week went by, then a second, and her car still hadn't returned. Mara noticed too. She wondered aloud if they'd split up or something. It would explain the arguments. Maybe Lena left for good, but the way she vanished felt sudden. One day her car was parked where it always was, and the next day, gone without a trace. And Caleb was acting strange. Every time we saw him, he avoided eye contact. He stopped waving, stopped smiling. If I caught him outside and tried to talk, he'd respond quickly, stumbling through sentences, trying to end the conversation almost immediately. The man looked constantly stressed, like he was bracing for something. After nearly 3 weeks of not seeing Lena, I finally decided to check on Caleb. Mara told me to leave it alone, that it wasn't our business, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and honestly, she was just as curious. I could see it in her face. So I went over and rang his doorbell. His car was in the driveway, so I knew he was home, but it took him almost 3 entire minutes to open the door, and when he finally did, the sight of him startled me. His face was shiny with sweat, like he'd been running laps inside, and he forced this big, awkward smile that didn't reach his eyes. I asked casually about Lena, why I hadn't seen her or her car around lately. Caleb stammered, then said, she's out of state. She went to stay with her mom for a while. She's really sick, so Lena went to help take care of her. It sounded off. Maybe it was true, but the way he delivered it felt like he was rehearsing a lie. And if it wasn't for how weirdly he was acting, I might have believed him. I asked why he was sweating so much, and he immediately said he'd been doing a workout upstairs. He rushed through his words, practically vibrating with nervous energy. And then something happened that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. From somewhere inside the house, somewhere deep, I heard a voice scream. A woman's voice. A desperate scream for help. My heart dropped. I asked him what that was. Caleb didn't even pause. He said, "Oh, I'm watching a movie upstairs. Forgot to pause it." That made no sense. 30 seconds earlier, he said he'd been doing workouts upstairs, not watching a movie. Nothing about the situation added up. I told him okay and said I'd see him later, but my stomach was twisting the entire walk home. I told Mara everything, and she looked just as disturbed as I was. She told me to call the cops, and I did. I asked to remain anonymous, not that it would matter. Caleb would know. An officer arrived pretty quickly. 10 minutes later, I heard more sirens. Then came 5 police cars and an ambulance. Mara and I rushed outside. Officers were running everywhere. Caleb was being hauled away in handcuffs, shouting angrily, while paramedics rushed past us with a stretcher carrying Lena. She was barely conscious. Later, we learned what had been happening inside their house. Caleb and Lena had been in a violent, abusive relationship. Things had escalated. He'd locked her in their basement, something I had no idea their house even had, for weeks. He assaulted her, raped her, tortured her. He even sold her car so it would look like she wasn't home, making her disappearance seem normal. And that scream I heard during our conversation? Lena had made noise while Caleb was at the door, and he stabbed her 5 times for it, right before I even walked back home. Suddenly, all of his strange behavior made sense in the worst possible way. Tragically, Lena didn't survive. She passed a couple hours later at the hospital. As Caleb was being moved into the police car, he glared at me like he already knew I'd called. "I know it was you who snitched," he hissed. "You'll regret this." If the situation hadn't been so horrifying, I might have laughed, knowing he'd be locked away for years. It's terrifying how little you truly know about the people living right next to you. Caleb and Lena seemed like an ordinary couple, friendly, maybe a little private, but harmless. No one could have guessed what was happening behind closed doors. A couple nights after everything happened, I woke in the middle of the night. The room was dark, but in the corner, near the foot of the bed, I saw the silhouette of a man. My eyes adjusted and my blood froze. It was Caleb. He whispered, "I told you you'd regret this." He was holding a knife. I tried to calm him down. I told him to talk, to think, but he didn't react. I pushed myself against the headboard as he suddenly lunged, and I woke up gasping for air. Just a nightmare. Mara was next to me, confused, asking what was wrong. I told her it was nothing, just a bad dream. She fell back asleep, but I stayed awake, heart pounding. That dream still haunts me. It's been years, yet it's as clear as the night I had it. The exact same words he said in the dream were the ones he'd said as the cops dragged him away. I never told Mara about it. I don't even know why. Maybe I didn't want to freak her out. Maybe I didn't want to sound paranoid. Eventually, after we got married, we moved across town to a quieter neighborhood. It's peaceful here. A nice house, friendly people. But the memory of being next to a murderer, someone who hid his true self so well, still clings to both of us. Some things don't fade, no matter how far you move. My name is Evan, and this happened 2 years ago, back when I was 24 and living in a small duplex on the outskirts of Riverside, Illinois. The house was old, split clean down the middle, like someone had sliced it in half. I rented the left side, and some man lived on the right. I never met him. I never even caught a glimpse of him. The landlord told me the guy kept to himself and worked nights, so I didn't think much of it. My bedroom was upstairs, and the wall behind my bed was the same wall that touched the neighbor's bedroom. If I pressed my ear to it, I could sometimes hear faint movements from the other side, but that's normal in old buildings. Stuff travels through walls. The first week was fine. Nothing weird. I was working long hours, coming home exhausted, eating whatever I could throw together, and crashing into bed. I was honestly just happy to have a place of my own. And then one night, it started. I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone, when I heard what sounded like a man talking, except it didn't sound like any normal voice. It was high-pitched, like someone forcing their voice into a fake, squeaky register. It was faint, coming from next door, but the wall was so thin it felt like the person was standing right beside me. I couldn't understand the words. It was just this strange, high mumbling. I tried to ignore it. Maybe he was on the phone or watching something on TV. Eventually, the mumbling stopped, and I drifted off. A few nights later, the mumbling came back, louder this time, and definitely a man's voice. I pressed my ear gently to the wall. It didn't sound like he was talking to someone else. It sounded like he was talking to himself. I didn't know whether to laugh it off or be creeped out. I pulled the blanket over my head and tried to block it out. I had to wake up early. I think that was the first night I realized I didn't feel great living there alone. About 2 weeks after that, the knocking started. I was half asleep when I heard 2 taps on the wall right next to my head. They were so close that I jerked, like someone had reached out and touched me. I sat up and waited, frozen. After a few seconds, 2 more taps, identical, coming from the other side. I knew right away this wasn't the house settling or some random noise. I rolled away from the wall and sat there shaking. I waited for more, but nothing else happened. Part of me wanted to knock back, but something told me that acknowledging it would be a huge mistake. The next morning, I convinced myself I was overreacting, but over the next week, the knocks kept happening. Soft sometimes, harder other times. Always late at night, always when I was trying to sleep. One night, it went on so long I put in headphones and blasted a loud fan just to drown it out. I remember lying there, wide awake, thinking about how thin the wall was, how close his room was, how close he was. He could literally have been lying 2 feet from me. It scared me more every night. Still, I tried to make excuses. Maybe he sat against the wall and bumped something by accident, but then came the night that changed everything, the night I'll never forget. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, eyes closed, but still awake. The room was dark except for the orange streetlight leaking through the blinds. Then came 3 slow knocks. I kept my eyes shut and tried not to react. That's when I heard it, the same high-pitched man's voice through the wall, muffled but not that muffled. I could hear the words clearly enough. He said, "What are you doing in there?" My lungs froze. I shot upright, shaking so violently I felt my teeth clattering. This wasn't some accidental noise anymore. He was addressing me, directly, through the wall. And the way he said it, he sounded like he knew exactly where I was. I grabbed my phone and called my boyfriend. I whispered everything, panicking, telling him I was terrified. He said he was coming over immediately and would stay the night. I left the lights on until he got there. Nothing else happened after that. Somehow that almost made it worse. It felt like the neighbor knew someone else was in the house. Things were quiet for a few days. I actually started convincing myself I'd misheard everything. But then, a few nights later, something happened that made me run out of the house screaming. I still get nightmares about it. This time, I was fully asleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but something snapped me awake instantly. I sat up a bit, confused. Then it started. Knocks on the wall. Rapid. Like someone drumming their fingers right beside my head. I yelled without thinking. I screamed at whoever it was to stop, to leave me alone. My heart was pounding so fast I could barely breathe. I don't know what I expected next, but what actually happened, I couldn't have imagined it in a million years. A voice spoke, but it came from inside my room. A deep voice in the dark said, "Go to sleep." It wasn't the high voice from the wall, it was deeper, closer, right there with me. I flew out of bed screaming. Everything after that is a blur. Running down the hallway, down the stairs. I just remember bursting out the front door and sprinting into the street barefoot, screaming for help like a lunatic. I kept looking behind me, expecting someone to be right there. I didn't stop screaming until a man 2 houses down stepped outside, staring at me like he didn't know what to do. I begged to use his phone to call my boyfriend, but he told me I should call the police. So I did. I stood on his sidewalk, shaking and sobbing until the officers arrived. When they came, I told them everything. They asked if I was certain someone had been inside my house. I said yes, 100% yes. They drove me back to the duplex and went in first. My front door was still wide open, exactly how I left it. No signs of forced entry. They asked if I remembered unlocking it. I didn't, but I was so panicked I couldn't swear to anything. They checked every room, every closet, under the bed. Nothing. No one. They knocked on the neighbor's door too. No answer. No lights on. It looked like no one was home. My boyfriend arrived and took me to his place. I don't think I slept at all. The next morning, I called my landlord and told him everything. I asked who the neighbor was, if he'd ever caused trouble, if there was anything I needed to know. I told him I wanted out of the lease. Immediately. At first, he resisted, going on about notice periods and paperwork. I told him I was never stepping foot in that place alone again. He needed to make this easy. It took a whole day of phone calls before he finally agreed. My boyfriend came with me every time I went back to pack. I refused to enter that house by myself. We knocked on the neighbor's door several times those days, but he never answered. It was like no one lived there, even though there were packages on the doorstep and a car in the driveway. Eventually, I moved back in with my parents until I found a new place. I still don't know if the neighbor ever stepped inside my room that night, or if someone else was in the house, or if the police just overlooked something. The idea that it was all in my head feels like the least realistic explanation, because when something is real, you know. Months later, my landlord told me the tenant next door eventually moved out too. No notice, no reason. I still don't know what really happened in that duplex. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you want chilling horror stories every single day, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next.